Let's finish up the problem that we did in the previous video, just make sure we're all on the same page. You should have gotten x equals negative 7i over 10 and a positive 7i over 10. Notice all of these answers are just opposites, and they all have an I. So let's try another one. So let's try this problem. 25x squared equals negative 4. Well, we can't factor this unless it's equal to 0. So is this equal to 0? No, obviously this equation is not equal to 0. So we need to add 4 to both sides. So now we have 25x squared plus 4 equals 0. Now we can factor. So I want you to factor this. Remember, this is a sum of squares. So look at all the previous examples we've done with sum of squares. So take the square root of the first term, square of the last term, write the factors. So the factors you should have gotten were 5x plus 2i and 5x minus 2i. Don't forget the I, but the 5 came from square root of 25. X came from square root of x squared. The 2 came from the square root of 4. But notice we have to have a positive and a negative 2 so that those middle terms cancel. It's part of the sum of squares. But when you have a positive and a negative 2, you get a negative 4, but we want a positive 4. That's why we add that I to both of those. We have that I beside them, because when we do I times I, it's I squared. It changes that to a positive 4. So now that you have factors, I want you to solve for x. So our two x values are negative 2i over 5 and a positive 2i over 5. Notice all of these answers, one is positive, one is negative, and make sure they have those i's. Okay, so the last one we're going to do on this page is just a little bit harder. We're not going to do part E. Let's look at part D. So first thing we do is check for a GCF. Yes, there is a GCF. We can divide both 2x squared and 36 by 2. So now let's focus on what's inside the parentheses, and notice it's a sum of squares, so we can factor that. So on your own, I want you to try to factor that. You may notice that the square root of 18 is not a perfect square. So what we're going to do is let's just write it as square root of 18. So this is a 1, so this is just square root of x squared is just x. But over here, square root of 18, for right now, let's just leave this as square root of 18. So the factors would be x plus square root of 18i times I. Notice that I is not underneath the square root. If you want to make sure there's no confusion about where that I is, another way you could write this factor would be x plus I square root of 18. This is really in the better notation, having the I in front, just so there's no confusion. So then the other factor is almost exactly the same, except you're subtracting. So it's that negative square root of 18 times I, or another way to write that would be that I square root of 18. And remember that GCF out in front, that 2. So right here we have two different sets of factors. I will say that the bottom one is a little bit more clear and in that correct notation that we really want, having the I in front of the square root. So we're going to stop that problem how it is and just factor it. We're not going to continue to solve. Let's go to the next page. So we're on page 134, number 6. This is our last problem. So we're almost done. Let's look at these two equations. We have x squared minus 144 equals 0 and x squared plus 144 equals 0. So all I want you to tell me in this first one, when you factor it and then eventually get x values, are these real or imaginary? Basically, I'm wanting to know, does your answer have an I with it or does it not? If it has an I, it's imaginary. If it doesn't, it's real. So what I want you to do first is just try to factor x squared minus 144.